Due to recent performance issues and, let's be honest, your condition, we've decided to terminate your employment effective immediately. Richard Carlson's voice echoed through the conference room speakers, amplified for all 47 employees watching the quarterly meeting via video call. His face filled the massive screen at the front of the room, his expression somewhere between boredom and disgust. My name is Lily Morrison, and I was 34 years old when I learned that human cruelty has no bottom floor. I stood frozen in the hallway outside conference room B, my laptop clutched against my chest, watching through the glass door as my face appeared on the screen inside. They were broadcasting my termination, live, to the entire company. Performance issues? I heard my own voice crack through the speakers, small and confused. Mr. Carlson, I've exceeded every quarterly target for 3 years straight. I just closed the Henderson account last week. Richard leaned back in his leather chair, that practiced smile spreading across his face. The smile he used when closing deals, when lying to investors, when destroying people. Lily, let's not make this awkward. You've been distracted, taking time off. We need people who can commit fully distraught core solutions. Distracted. He called chemotherapy distracted. Someone in the conference room laughed, then another. Within seconds, nervous laughter rippled through the entire room. 47 people I'd worked alongside for 6 years, people I'd trained, people whose birthdays I remembered, people I'd covered for when they needed time off for their kids or their vacations or their hangovers. They were laughing. I have stage 2 breast cancer, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but somehow the microphone caught every syllable. I've been coming to work between treatments. I haven't missed a single deadline. Richard waved his hand dismissively, like he was swatting away a fly. And we admire your dedication, truly. But Strawcore is a performance-driven environment. We can't afford to carry anyone who isn't operating at 100%. I'm sure you understand. I understood perfectly. I understood that 6 weeks ago. Richard had pulled me aside after a client meeting and told me I was looking rough and that maybe I should consider my options. I understood that 3 weeks ago, when I came back from a doctor's appointment, my project had been reassigned to Brandon Mitchell, Richard's nephew who had joined the company 4 months ago with 0 experience. I understood that last week when I'd asked HR about my medical leave rights, I'd been told the request would be reviewed, but never got a response. What Richard Carlson didn't understand was that I had been documenting everything, every email, every reassigned project, every conversation where he'd made comments about my appearance, my reliability, my dedication. Every time he'd given my work to someone else while I was at chemotherapy appointments he knew about because they were on the company calendar he had access to. I had screenshots. I had recordings from my phone placed strategically during meetings where he discussed dealing with the Lily situation. I had messages from other employees he'd instructed to freeze me out, to exclude me from projects, to make my position redundant. But standing there in that hallway, watching myself being humiliated on a screen the size of a small car, I didn't say any of that. I just stood there silent, letting Richard Carlson believe he'd won. Security will escort you out, Richard continued, looking at someone off camera. Please surrender your laptop, access cards, and any company property. Your final paycheck, minus the appropriate deductions, will be mailed within 2 weeks. The screen went black. The meeting continued. Someone made a joke about making room for fresh blood, and everyone laughed again. My termination had taken exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and it had been entertainment for people eating bagels and drinking coffee. I walked to my desk in the open floor plan, past cubicles where people suddenly became very interested in their computer screens. Nobody made eye contact. Sarah Chen, who I'd mentored for 2 years, actually turned her chair away as I approached. Marcus Williams, who'd cried on my shoulder when his marriage fell apart, studied a spreadsheet like it contained the meaning of life. Brandon Mitchell, Richard's nephew, was already sitting at what used to be my desk. He'd moved in fast. My photos were in a cardboard box. My coffee mug with World's Okayest Employee that my niece gave me was wrapped in newspaper. My awards, my client appreciation plaques, my 3 years of perfect attendance certificates before cancer made that impossible, all packed away like I'd never existed. Nothing personal, Brandon said, not looking up from my computer, which he was already logged into. Just business. Two security guards appeared at my elbows, young guys, both looking uncomfortable. One of them, Marcus, I recognized from the lobby. I'd always said good morning to him. He couldn't meet my eyes now. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," he said quietly. The walk to the elevator felt like miles. Every step past colleagues who suddenly found their keyboards fascinating. Past the conference room where Richard was probably already celebrating. Past the motivational posters about teamwork and integrity that decorated the walls like lies. In the elevator, alone with the two guards, Marcus finally spoke. "I'm sorry, Miss Morrison. For what it's worth, this is messed up." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "My mom had breast cancer," he continued. "She beat it. I hope you do too." The elevator doors opened to the lobby. They walked me to the front entrance, where people entering for work meetings stopped to stare at the woman being escorted out by security. The ultimate walk of shame. I stood on the sidewalk outside Stratcore Solutions' gleaming downtown headquarters, holding a cardboard box that represented 6 years of my life, and I let myself cry. Not because I'd lost my job. Not because I'd been humiliated. But because for just a moment, watching those people laugh, I felt small and worthless and broken. Then I remembered something Richard Carlson didn't know. He didn't know that my husband wasn't just some guy, like I'd always said when people asked about my personal life. He didn't know that I kept my marriage private because my husband preferred it that way, preferred to keep his professional life and personal life completely separate. He didn't know that the reason I'd been so calm during that termination, the reason I documented everything so carefully, was because I'd learned from the best. Richard Carlson was about to discover that destroying Lily Morrison was the biggest mistake of his career. Because my husband had taught me something important. Patience, preparation, and perfect timing beat rage every single time. I pulled out my phone and sent a simple text message. "It happened. Just like you said it would. I have everything." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "Good. Come home. We have work to do." I walked toward the parking garage, past the Stratcore logo etched in marble, past the mission statement about valuing every team member, and I smiled. Really smiled, for the first time in weeks. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next will show you exactly why you should never underestimate a woman who's been preparing for war. Richard Carlson thought he'd ended my story today. He had no idea he'd just written the first chapter of his own destruction. The apartment was dark when I got home at 11 a.m., middle of a workday when I should have been at my desk closing deals. I dropped the cardboard box by the door and just stood there. Keys still in my hand, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard Carlson's assistant, Melissa. "FYI, your health insurance terminates at midnight tonight. COBRA enrollment forms will be mailed. Good luck with everything. Midnight." I had a chemotherapy session scheduled for Thursday, 2 days away. The treatment cost $8,000 per session without insurance. I had 4 sessions left in this round. I did the math automatically, a skill from 6 years of analyzing client budgets and profit margins. $32,000, plus the surgery my oncologist said I'd need after chemo. Another $45,000 minimum. My savings account had $6,000 in it because cancer had already drained everything else. My hands started shaking. Not from fear. From rage so pure it felt like electricity in my veins. Another text. This time in the company-wide group chat I was apparently still part of, celebrating Q4 results at Harbor Club tonight, 7 p.m. drinks on Stratcore. Brandon Mitchell replied immediately. "Can't wait. First round's on me since I just got promoted to senior account manager, my position." He'd gotten my position. 4 months of experience and a last name of Carlson, and he had the job I'd built from nothing. Sarah Chun. "Congrats, Brandon. Well deserved." Marcus Williams. "About time we got some young energy and leadership." I scrolled through message after message, people congratulating Brandon. People celebrating quarterly results that I had delivered. People acting like I'd never existed. Then Richard posted a photo. Him and Brandon, arms around each other's shoulders, both holding glasses of whiskey in Richard's office. The caption, passing the torch to the next generation. Here's to loyalty and dedication. Loyalty. Dedication. The words I'd lived by for 6 years while Richard Carlson built his empire on my back. I hadn't told anyone at Stratcor the full story of how I'd started there because Richard had asked me not to. Better to let people think you earned it on merit alone, he'd said. Looks better for both of us. But the truth was, 6 years ago, Stratcor Solutions didn't exist. 6 years ago, Richard Carlson had a failing consulting business run out of a strip mall office with water-stained ceiling tiles and furniture from Goodwill. He had 3 clients, 2 of whom hadn't paid in months. He was 60 days from bankruptcy. I was working at Goldman Sachs, junior analyst position, making 6 figures, on track for promotion. I met Richard at a networking event where he was desperately pitching anyone who'd listen. His pitch was terrible. His business model was broken. But his idea, the core concept of specialized market analysis for mid-sized companies, that had potential. I spent 3 months helping him rebuild the entire business strategy. Nights and weekends for free, because he couldn't afford to pay me and I believed in the idea. I connected him with 5 of Goldman's clients who needed exactly what he offered. I introduced him to investors. I helped him secure $2 million in seed funding by creating financial projections that actually made sense. When he offered me a job as his first real employee, I took a $40,000 pay cut to join him. My colleagues at Goldman thought I was insane. My parents thought I'd lost my mind. But I believed in what we were building. For 3 years, I was employee number 1. I brought in 80% of the clients. I trained every new hire. I worked 70-hour weeks while Richard schmoozed with investors and took credit for strategies I designed. When Stratcor finally went public 2 years ago, making Richard a multimillionaire overnight, I got a $5,000 bonus and a plaque that said valued team member. I'd asked about equity once, early on. Richard had laughed. Lily, you're amazing at what you do, but you're an employee. Equity is for founders. You understand, right? I'd understood. I'd understood that I was useful but disposable. That my contributions would be erased from the story Richard told investors and journalists. That I would never be anything more than a line item on his payroll. But I'd stayed anyway, because I needed the job, needed the stability, needed the health insurance that would later become the chain Richard used to control me. My phone rang. My husband's name lit up the screen. James. I saw the group chat, he said without preamble. Are you okay? They're celebrating, I said, my voice flat. They're actually celebrating. Of course they are. Predators always celebrate after a kill. Makes them feel powerful. I heard him typing, that familiar sound of his fingers flying across a keyboard. He was already working. I pulled the company financials, he continued. Public records since they went public. Want to know something interesting? What? Stratcor's stock price is inflated. Significantly. Richard's been reporting projected earnings as actual earnings in 3 of the last 4 quarters. Not technically illegal if you bury it in the footnotes, but ethically bankrupt in a lawsuit waiting to happen if investors realize they're betting on fantasy numbers. My husband wasn't just good at finding information. He was exceptional at it. 20 years as an investigative journalist for major publications, exposing corporate corruption, political scandals, financial fraud. He'd taken down senators, CEOs, entire companies built on lies. He'd won 2 Pulitzer Prizes for investigative reporting. And Richard Carlson had just made his worst enemy without knowing it. There's more, James said. I made some calls. Turns out you're not the first person Richard's done this to. Found 3 former employees with similar stories. 2 women, 1 man. All fired after medical issues. All threatened with legal action if they spoke publicly. All signed NDAs as part of severance packages. I didn't sign anything, I said. Exactly. You're the first one who walked out without signing away your rights. Which means you can talk. And more importantly, I can write about it. I closed my eyes, feeling pieces of a plan clicking into place. He doesn't know who you are. I've been very careful about that. You kept your maiden name at work. We don't have social media presence together. I've never attended a single Stratcor function. As far as Richard Carlson knows, Your husband is some random guy who works in accounting or marketing or whatever boring story you told people. I told people James worked in communications. Not technically a lie. What do you need from me? I asked. Everything you documented. Every email, every recording, every screenshot. I need dates, times, witnesses. I need the names of those clients you brought in who Richard claimed as his own wins. I need financial records showing the pay discrepancy between you and Brandon. I need it all. I have it all. I know you do. I married a woman who plans 3 steps ahead. I could hear the smile in his voice. But Lily, I need you to understand something. If we do this, if we really do this, there's no going back. This won't just cost Richard his reputation. It'll cost him everything. His company, his wealth, possibly his freedom if we find criminal negligence. Are you sure? I thought about sitting in that chemotherapy chair last week, poison dripping into my veins while I answered work emails because I was terrified of falling behind. I thought about Richard looking at my bald head during a client meeting and saying, maybe wear a wig next time. Clients prefer a more polished appearance. I thought about 47 people laughing at my pain. I'm sure, I said. Good, come to my office. We have work to do. James's office was in our spare bedroom, converted into what he called his war room. 3 monitors, filing cabinets full of source documents from previous investigations, a whiteboard covered in connections and timelines from whatever story he was currently chasing. He was waiting for me, already pulling up a blank document on his center screen. Tell me everything, he said. Start from the beginning. I spent 4 hours walking him through 6 years of Stratcore solutions. Every client meeting where Richard took credit for my strategies. Every hire I'd trained who was now celebrating my termination. Every time I'd been passed over for promotion while less qualified men were elevated. James typed everything, occasionally stopping to ask clarifying questions, to request specific documentation, to verify details. This wasn't my husband offering comfort. This was James Morrison, investigative journalist, building a case. Here's what we're going to do, he said finally, leaning back in his chair. I'm going to write 2 articles. The first one drops tomorrow morning, front page of the Herald. Personal story, your perspective, the human cost of corporate cruelty. It'll be powerful, emotional, shareable. People will be outraged. And the second? The second drops 3 days later. That's where I burn him to the ground. Financial impropriety, pattern of discrimination, falsified earnings reports, everything. But I need those 3 days for people to fall in love with your story first. By the time the second article hits, the public will want blood. Richard will lawyer up immediately, I said. Let him. Everything I write will be documented, sourced, and bulletproof. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know exactly how close to the sun I can fly. My phone buzzed again. Another message in the Stratcore group chat. Richard Carlson. Reminder, company policy states that terminated employees are prohibited from disparaging Stratcore Solutions or its leadership in any public forum. Violations will result in legal action. Have a great evening, everyone. James read the message over my shoulder and laughed. Actually laughed. He just threatened you in writing, in a group chat with witnesses. He's not just arrogant. He's stupid. He thinks he's untouchable, I said. They always do, right up until they're not. James pulled up his email and started typing. I watched the recipient list grow. His editor at the Herald, his lawyer, 3 other journalists he trusted, a contact at the SEC. What are you doing? I asked. Declaring war, he said simply. Richard Carlson humiliated you in front of 47 people. By Friday, 47 million people are going to know his name. And they're going to despise him. He hit send, then turned to me. Get some rest. Tomorrow your story goes public. And Lily, I promise you by the time I'm done, Richard Carlson is going to wish he'd never learned your name. I went to bed that night still angry, still hurt, still carrying the weight of being discarded like garbage. But for the first time since my diagnosis, I felt something else too. Hope, not the fragile kind that breaks easily, but the sharp, dangerous kind forged in fire. Richard Carlson had made a critical mistake. He'd assumed that destroying me meant he'd won. But winners don't celebrate before checking if their opponent is actually down. And I was far from down. The Herald published at 6 a.m. I woke up to my phone vibrating continuously. Notifications flooding in faster than I could read them. Messages from former colleagues, old friends from Goldman Sachs, people I hadn't spoken to in years. The headline was simple, devastating. I had cancer. My CEO fired me on camera while everyone laughed. James had written it in first person, my voice, my words. He'd captured everything. The chemotherapy appointments scheduled around client meetings. The weight loss that made my clothes hang loose. The exhaustion that felt like drowning. The moment Richard's face appeared on that screen and casually destroyed my life. But he'd done something brilliant. He'd included the video. Somehow, James had obtained the recording of that quarterly meeting. The actual footage of Richard terminating me, of people laughing, of my small voice trying to explain I had cancer, while my boss waved his hand dismissively. How did you get this? I asked, finding James already at his desk, monitoring social media reactions. Marcus, the security guard. He felt guilty about walking you out. Turns out Stratcor records all their meetings for compliance purposes. He sent me the file last night with a sworn statement that it's authentic and unedited. The video was spreading. Fast. Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. People were sharing it with captions like, "This is corporate America. How is this legal?" And I'm never shopping with companies that treat employees like this. By 8 a.m., it had 200,000 views. By 9 a.m., 500,000. By 10 a.m., morning news shows were discussing it. A segment on NBC featured an employment lawyer explaining how Richard's termination likely violated the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Family and Medical Leave Act, and possibly constituted wrongful termination. My phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Morrison? This is Diana Chun from the EEOC. I'm calling about your case against Stratcor Solutions. We'd like to open a formal investigation. I'd filed a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission at 11 p.m. last night while James was writing. Another piece moving into place. Thank you, I said. I have extensive documentation. We've seen the video. Miss Morrison, I've been doing this work for 15 years. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of disability discrimination I've encountered. We'll be in touch. James was grinning at his monitors. Stratcor stock just dropped 12% in pre-market trading. Investors are spooked. My old work phone, which I'd forgotten to surrender yesterday, started buzzing. Messages flooded the Stratcor group chat. Melissa, Richard's assistant. Everyone stop talking to press. Refer all media inquiries to legal. This is a direct order. Too late. Someone had already leaked. A reporter from Bloomberg had called 5 employees asking about workplace culture. 3 had talked, all anonymously, all confirming that Richard Carlson was exactly as terrible as the video suggested. Then Richard himself posted in the group chat. To clarify misinformation being spread by a disgruntled former employee, Ms. Morrison's termination was purely performance-based. Her medical condition was not a factor. Stratcor Solutions maintains the highest ethical standards and fully complies with all employment laws. This matter is closed. James read it and started typing furiously. He just lied in writing. Beautiful. How is that beautiful? Because I have 12 emails where he explicitly discusses firing you because of your cancer. I have a recording of him telling Brandon that you were a liability because of medical costs. He just committed perjury in what will become a legal proceeding. My phone rang again. Sarah Chun, my former mentee. I answered. Lily, I'm so sorry. Her voice was shaking. I'm so sorry. I should have said something yesterday. I should have defended you. I was scared and I'm a coward and I'm sorry. Sarah. He threatened us, she continued, words tumbling out. After you left, Richard called a meeting. He said anyone who contacted you or spoke to media would be fired immediately. He said you were going to try to destroy the company and we needed to choose sides. I chose wrong. I chose to keep my job over doing the right thing. You have a mortgage? I said quietly. A daughter in private school. I understand. No, you don't. You have cancer, and I laughed. I actually laughed because everyone else was laughing and I didn't want to stand out. She was crying now. I hate myself. Sarah, are you somewhere private? I'm in my car. Are you willing to talk to my husband? On the record. Silence. Then, yes, tell me what to do. By noon, James had statements from 4 current StratCore employees, all willing to testify about Richard's pattern of discrimination, his inappropriate comments about my appearance during illness, his explicit statements about firing me before I became too expensive. By 1 p.m., 2 former employees had reached out through James's professional email. Both had been fired after medical issues. Both had signed NDAs. Both were willing to break them because some things are more important than money. Jennifer Walsh had been terminated 3 years ago, 2 weeks after returning from maternity leave with complications. She'd signed an NDA for $15,000 in severance. Marcus Rivera had been fired 18 months ago after a car accident required surgery and physical therapy. His NDA had cost StratCore $20,000. He budgets for this, James said, adding their stories to his investigation file. He pays people off as a cost of doing business. He's done it so many times he's gotten sloppy. My phone buzzed. A direct message on LinkedIn from someone I didn't know. I'm a reporter for The Atlantic. Would you be willing to discuss your experience at StratCore for a feature on disability discrimination in corporate America? Then another, from The Washington Post. We're investigating StratCore Solutions employment practices. Can we talk? Then CNN, then Reuters. Then the Wall Street Journal. Richard Carlson had wanted this to go away quietly. Instead, he'd created a firestorm. At 3 p.m., StratCore's official Twitter account posted a statement. StratCore Solutions is committed to supporting all employees, including those facing health challenges. We take these allegations seriously and are conducting a thorough internal review. The comments were brutal. You fired her on camera while people laughed. We have the video. Internal review by who? The CEO who did it. I'm canceling our contract. Not doing business with companies that treat people like garbage. That last comment was from Henderson Industries, the massive account I closed 3 weeks ago. My final deal for StratCore, and they were already walking away. James showed me StratCore's stock ticker. Down 18% now. Trading had been halted twice due to volatility. Richard's losing millions, he said. Personally. He owns 40% of company stock. Every percentage point that drops is real money out of his pocket. My phone rang. A Boston area code. Miss Morrison? This is Catherine Wade from Wade & Associates. We're a plaintiff's law firm specializing in employment discrimination. We'd like to represent you pro bono. No fees unless we win, and frankly, this case is so solid we're not worried about winning. Pro bono? Your story matters. What happened to you is happening to thousands of people who don't have platforms or resources to fight back. We want to send a message. Are you interested? I looked at James. He nodded. Yes, I said. I'm very interested. Catherine talked for 20 minutes, outlining potential damages, lost wages, emotional distress, punitive damages for particularly egregious discrimination. Conservative estimate, $2 to $3 million. Aggressive estimate, $8 to $10 million if a jury got angry enough. They'll want to settle, she said. Probably within a week. Companies like StratCore can't afford prolonged litigation with this much public attention. Expect a call from their lawyers offering money and an NDA. And if I don't want to settle, then we go to trial and destroy them publicly. Your choice entirely. After the call, I sat in silence, processing. 24 hours ago, I'd been fired and humiliated. Now I had the EEOC investigating, top-tier lawyers offering representation, and a husband systematically dismantling my former employer's reputation. James printed something and handed it to me. A screenshot of an email. From Richard Carlson to Brandon Mitchell, date, 2 days ago, subject, Lily situation. Make sure you're ready to take over her accounts immediately. She won't last the week anyway with her condition. Might as well position you as the replacement so clients see continuity. When she's gone, we'll spin it as you're choosing to focus on health. Nobody needs to know we pushed her out. Where did you get this? I asked. Source protection. But it's authenticated. He planned this. Premeditated discrimination. Another email, same chain. Also, make sure HR has documentation ready about performance concerns. We need cover if she tries to claim discrimination. Probably won't though. Sick people don't have fight left in them. I read that last line 3 times. Sick people don't have fight left in them. James was watching me carefully. Are you okay? He thought I was too weak to fight back. He was wrong. He was very, very wrong. At 5 p.m., Richard posted a video statement on Stratcor's website. Professional background, carefully lit PR team's fingerprints all over it. I want to address recent allegations made by a former employee. At Stratcor Solutions, we value every team member and maintain strict policies against discrimination of any kind. Miss Morrison's employment ended due to documented performance issues unrelated to her medical condition. While I wish her well in her recovery, these accusations are false and appear designed to damage our reputation. We will vigorously defend ourselves against any legal action. The video had comments disabled. It was posted simultaneously to LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. The response was immediate and vicious. People screen recorded the video and reposted it with commentary. Employment lawyers dissected every sentence, pointing out legal vulnerabilities. Former Stratcor employees started sharing their own stories and comments on news articles. By 6 p.m., Stratcor Solutions was trending nationally. By 7 p.m., their largest client, Morrison Tech, no relation to my husband, issued a statement suspending their contract pending investigation of the allegations. By 8 p.m., 3 board members had resigned. James was updating his investigation file, pulling financial records, cross-referencing statements. His second article was scheduled for Friday morning, 2 days away. The one that would finish this. I found something else, he said quietly. Richard's been selling stock. A lot of stock. Over the past 6 months, he's liquidated almost $4 million in Stratcor shares. Is that unusual? For a CEO who keeps telling investors the company is growing. Very. It suggests he knows something the market doesn't. Possibly that those inflated earnings projections won't materialize. That's securities fraud if I can prove he knew the numbers were fake when he sold. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Melissa, Richard's assistant. He's losing it. Screaming at everyone. Blaming you for everything. Be careful. He's dangerous when cornered. I showed James the text. Good, he said. Angry people make mistakes. Let him spiral. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed scrolling through hundreds of messages from strangers, cancer survivors, people who'd been fired unfairly, parents whose children had been discriminated against. You're so brave. Thank you for speaking up. You're helping so many people. But I didn't feel brave. I felt angry and scared and vindictive. I wanted Richard Carlson to suffer the way he'd made me suffer. I wanted him to feel small and worthless and broken. James found me at 2 a.m., still scrolling. Can't sleep? He asked. I keep thinking about that phrase. Sick people don't have fight left in them. He underestimated you. No, I said. He underestimated us. James smiled. Friday morning, the second article drops. Everything we found. The fraud, the pattern of discrimination, the former employees, the financial manipulation. All of it? Are you ready? I thought about Richard's face on that screen, his dismissive hand wave, his casual cruelty. I thought about people laughing at my pain. I'm ready, I said. What Richard Carlson didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that destroying me hadn't just made me angry. It had given me purpose. And it had activated someone far more dangerous than a terminally ill employee with nothing left to lose. It had activated a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist with a vendetta, unlimited resources, and absolutely nothing to lose. Richard wanted a fight. He was about to get a war. Friday morning, 6 a.m. The Herald's front page carried James's second article, Stratcor Solutions, A Pattern of Fraud, Discrimination, and Corporate Greed, by James Morrison. Investigative reporter. I watched the article go live from James's office, his byline prominent at the top. For 6 years, I kept my marriage quiet at work. Richard had never bothered to learn my husband's last name, never cared enough about my personal life to ask questions. That oversight was about to cost him everything. The article was devastating. 20 pages of documented evidence, financial analysis, witness testimonies. James had structured it like a prosecution case, building layer upon layer of irrefutable proof. Section 1 detailed the financial fraud. Inflated earnings reports, stock manipulation, Richard's $4 million in suspiciously timed stock sales before projected earnings failed to materialize. James had obtained internal emails where Richard explicitly instructed his CFO to massage the numbers for investor presentations. Section 2 exposed the pattern of discrimination. Jennifer Walsh, Marcus Rivera, and 3 other former employees, all fired after medical issues, all paid off with NDAs, all sharing eerily similar stories. James had found 7 cases over 4 years. 7 people whose lives Richard had destroyed to protect his bottom line. Section 3 was mine. But James hadn't just told my story. He'd obtained my complete employment file through legal discovery. Catherine Wade worked fast. Every email I'd sent bringing in clients, every strategy document I'd written, every revenue report showing my accounts generated 62% of Stratcor's total income. Then James had compared that to Brandon Mitchell's file. 4 months employed. 0 closed deals. 3 client complaints. Annual salary, $140,000. My salary after 6 years, $95,000. The evidence was undeniable. Richard hadn't just fired a sick employee. He'd systematically stolen credit for her work while planning her termination. Section 4 destroyed him completely. James had interviewed 12 current Stratcor employees, all anonymously, all confirming toxic workplace culture, discrimination, retaliation against anyone who questioned Richard's decisions. But the final section, Section 5, that was personal. James had obtained footage from the Harbor Club, the celebration dinner after my termination. Someone had recorded Richard's speech, drunk and unguarded, making jokes about dead weight and cutting out the cancer while people laughed. The double meaning was clear. Disgusting. The video was embedded directly in the article. Richard Carlson, CEO of a publicly traded company, joking about firing an employee with cancer, calling it cutting out the cancer, while his nephew and leadership team cheered. My phone started ringing at 6:07 a.m. Catherine Wade. We're filing the lawsuit this morning. $15 million in damages. The evidence in this article makes it bulletproof. CNN. Can you appear on camera for the morning show at 8 a.m.? The EEOC investigator. Ms. Morrison, we're escalating this to criminal investigation. The Department of Labor is involved now. By 7 a.m., Stratcor stock had dropped 34% in pre-market trading. Trading was halted. The SEC announced a formal investigation into securities fraud. By 7:30 a.m., 3 major clients had publicly terminated their contracts, citing ethical concerns. At 7:45 a.m., Stratcor's board of directors issued an emergency statement. Effective immediately, Richard Carlson has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. CFO David Park will serve as interim CEO. Richard wasn't just losing control. He was being forcibly removed from the company he'd built. My old work phone buzzed. The Stratcor group chat was exploding. Melissa. Emergency all-hands meeting at 9 a.m. attendance mandatory. Sarah Chen. What is happening? Marcus Williams. Did anyone else know her husband was that James Morrison? The investigative journalist? The Pulitzer Prize winner? Brandon Mitchell. We're screwed. We're completely screwed. Then, at 8:03 a.m., my personal phone rang. Richard Carlson's name appeared on the screen. I put it on speaker so James could hear. You destroyed me. Richard's voice was shaking, rage barely contained. You and your husband destroyed everything I built. No, Richard, I said calmly. You destroyed yourself. I just documented it. I made you. You were nothing before Stratcor. I gave you a chance when no one else would. You took a 40% pay cut from Goldman Sachs because I believed in your vision, I said. I brought you every major client. I designed the strategies that made you rich. And when I got sick, you threw me away like garbage. You're sick. You should have quit. You were a liability. James leaned toward the phone. Mr. Carlson, this is James Morrison. You should know this call is being recorded. Please keep talking about how sick people are liabilities. My lawyers love that kind of content. Silence. Then, you're her husband? 20 years married. You never asked. You never cared about Lily beyond what she could do for you. That was your first mistake. Your second mistake, I added, was thinking sick people don't fight back. Remember that email? The one where you told Brandon that sick people don't have fight left in them? Richard's breathing was heavy on the line. How did you? I have everything, Richard. Every email, every message, every recording. 6 years of documentation. Did you really think I'd work that hard for you and not keep records? This is extortion. I'll sue you for what? James interrupted. Publishing the truth? Every fact in my article is sourced and verified. You're welcome to sue me. Discovery will be fun. I'll get access to even more of your files. The board fired me, Richard said, his voice breaking. My own board. The company I built. The company Lily built, James corrected. You just put your name on it. What do you want? Money? I'll pay you. Name a price. I'd been waiting for this. The moment when Richard Carlson, who believed everything could be bought, tried to buy his way out. I don't want your money, Richard. I want you to understand what you did. You humiliated a woman with cancer in front of 47 people because it made you feel powerful. You stole credit for her work. You paid yourself millions while she struggled to afford chemotherapy. You are everything wrong with corporate America. I'll go public, he threatened. I'll tell everyone you were a terrible employee, that you. Please do, James said cheerfully. Give me more material. The sequel article writes itself. Richard hung up. At 9 a.m., I watched the Stratcor emergency meeting via a link Sarah Chen secretly sent me. The interim CEO, David Park, looked exhausted. Due to recent revelations and ongoing investigations, Stratcor Solutions is implementing immediate changes. Richard Carlson is no longer with the company in any capacity. We are conducting a full audit of employment practices, financial reporting, and corporate governance. Someone off-camera shouted, Are we going to be okay? Is the company going to survive? David's silence said everything. At 10 a.m., FBI agents arrived at Stratcor headquarters. Securities fraud investigation. They left with boxes of files and Richard's computer. At 11 a.m., Richard's wife filed for divorce. Her statement to TMZ, yes, this had reached TMZ, was brutal. I had no idea who I was married to. The man I saw in those videos is a stranger. I stand with Lily Morrison. At noon, the state attorney general announced criminal charges, securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud. Richard Carlson was facing up to 20 years in federal prison. By 1 p.m., Stratcor's stock had lost 67% of its value. The company that had made Richard a multimillionaire was collapsing. His personal net worth, calculated by Forbes just last week at $45 million, had evaporated to roughly $6 million, most of it tied up in assets being seized by investigators. Catherine Wade called with an update. Stratcor's lawyers want to meet. They're offering $8 million to settle and avoid trial. What do you recommend? I asked. Normally I'd say take it. But Lily, if we go to trial, we'll win more. Juries hate executives who fire cancer patients. We could get $15 to $20 million, maybe more in punitive damages. I thought about Richard's voice on the phone, broken and desperate. I thought about him losing his company, his wife, his freedom. I thought about him facing criminal charges that could put him in prison for decades. And I realized something. I didn't need more money. I needed justice. And justice was already being served. Tell them $10 million, I said. Plus a public apology from Richard Carlson, written by him personally, published in the Herald, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. and Stratcor establishes a $5 million fund for employees who face discrimination. Administered by an independent organization. They'll never agree to the apology, Catherine said. Then we go to trial. 3 hours later, Stratcor's lawyers called back. We agree to all terms. Richard Carlson's apology published on Saturday morning. It was clearly written by lawyers, sanitized and corporate. But there was one line, buried in the middle, that I knew came from Richard himself. I failed to recognize the humanity of the people who built this company. I prioritized profit over people, and in doing so, I lost everything that mattered. I am deeply sorry. That afternoon, James and I sat on our couch, exhausted, watching the news coverage. Every major outlet was running the story. Employment discrimination, corporate fraud, the fall of a CEO. But they were also running something else. Stories of hope. Cancer survivors sharing how my fight gave them courage. Employees speaking up about their own workplace discrimination. A national conversation about how we treat sick workers in America. You did that, James said quietly. You changed things. We did that, I corrected. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah Chen. The whole company just got an email. New policies effective immediately. Protected medical leave, anti-retaliation protections, anonymous reporting for discrimination. They're naming it the Morrison Employee Protection Program. After you. I stared at the message, tears welling up. Richard had tried to erase me from Stratcor's story. Instead, my name would be permanently embedded in the company's policy, protecting every employee who came after me. That evening, James published a follow-up article. Not about Richard this time, but about the 7 other employees who'd been silenced. Their stories, their courage in breaking NDAs to speak truth. The article ended with a call to action. Companies needed to stop weaponizing NDAs to hide discrimination. Within 24 hours, 3 senators proposed legislation limiting NDAs in discrimination cases. If this story of justice resonates with you, consider subscribing. Because what we did here, holding powerful people accountable, this is just the beginning of how broken systems start to change. Richard Carlson had thought firing me would make me disappear. Instead, he'd created someone who couldn't be silenced. Backed by someone who'd built a career on exposing people exactly like him. The battle was over. Richard had lost his company, his reputation, his freedom, his family, everything. But the war, the bigger war against corporate discrimination and abuse of power, that was just beginning. And I was no longer just Lily Morrison, cancer patient, fired employee. I was Lily Morrison, the woman who brought down a CEO, changed corporate policy, and proved that sick people have more fight in them than Richard Carlson could ever imagine. 18 months later, I stood in front of a congressional hearing room, testifying about workplace discrimination against employees with disabilities. My hair had grown back. Not the way it was before chemotherapy, but different, curlier, softer, silver streaks threading through the dark brown. I'd stopped trying to hide the changes cancer had made to my body. The scars, visible and invisible, were part of my story now. The cancer was in remission. 6 months clear. My oncologist used words like excellent prognosis and complete response to treatment. The surgery I'd needed, the one that cost $45,000, had been covered by the settlement money. The best doctors, the best care, no more choosing between treatment and rent. Miss Morrison. Senator Patricia Hawkins leaned forward. Can you explain how your case led to the Employee Protection Act we're discussing today? I took a breath. When Stratcor fired me, I had a choice: stay silent and survive, or speak up and fight. I chose to fight because my husband gave me the resources and platform to do it. But thousands of workers facing discrimination don't have those resources. They don't have investigative journalists for spouses. They don't have pro bono lawyers. They sign NDAs because they need the money to survive. The hearing room was packed. Camera crews, journalists, advocacy organizations. James sat in the back, watching with quiet pride. The legislation you're considering would limit employers' ability to silence victims of discrimination through NDAs, I continued. It would protect whistleblowers. It would make retaliation a federal crime with serious penalties. These aren't radical ideas. They're basic human dignity. After my testimony, reporters swarmed. I'd gotten used to media attention over the past year. 60 Minutes had done a feature. The New York Times had profiled me. Netflix was developing a documentary. But I'd also done something else with the settlement money. I'd started a foundation. The Morrison Foundation for Workplace Justice provided legal assistance to employees facing discrimination. In 18 months, we'd helped 247 people fight back against unfair terminations, retaliation, and harassment. We'd won or settled 89% of cases. Sarah Chun ran the foundation's day-to-day operations. After everything that happened, she quit StrotCorp and asked if she could work for me instead. I want to help people like I should have helped you, she'd said. Marcus, the security guard who'd leaked the video, was our outreach coordinator, connecting with workers who were afraid to come forward. Even Jennifer Walsh and Marcus Rivera, the former StrotCorp employees who'd broken their NDAs to help my case, worked with the foundation now, counseling others who'd been silenced by corporate settlements. We were a team built from Richard Carlson's victims, and we were winning. StrotCorp Solutions had survived. Barely. The company had been restructured, sold off divisions, laid off 40% of staff. David Park had managed to stabilize it, but it was a shadow of what it had been. The Morrison Employee Protection Program I'd inspired was now industry standard, copied by companies across the country trying to avoid becoming the next viral discrimination scandal. Brandon Mitchell had been fired 3 months after I was, when auditors discovered he'd falsified client reports. Last I heard, he was working at a car dealership. Richard Carlson's fall had been absolute. The criminal trial lasted 6 weeks. James attended every day, taking notes for the book he was writing. I went once to see Richard sentenced. He'd aged dramatically. The confident, arrogant CEO was gone, replaced by a thin gray man in an ill-fitting suit. His lawyers had negotiated a plea deal, 8 years in federal prison for securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Before sentencing, the judge had asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I'd stood in that courtroom, looking at Richard across the room, and said, "You told your nephew that sick people don't have fight left in them. You were wrong. Sick people, vulnerable people, people you tried to break, we have more fight than you ever imagined. Not because we're stronger than you, but because we fight for something bigger than ourselves. You fought for money and power. I fought for dignity and justice. That's why you lost." Richard had closed his eyes, shoulders slumping. The judge sentenced him to 8 years, no parole eligibility for 5. "Mr. Carlson," she'd said, "you abused your position of power to harm vulnerable people, then tried to hide your crimes behind legal threats and money. This court finds your actions particularly egregious given the resources you had to do the right thing." Richard was currently serving his sentence at a minimum security federal prison in Pennsylvania. His wife had remarried. His children, adults with their own families, had publicly distanced themselves from him. His name, once synonymous with success, was now a cautionary tale taught in business ethics classes. He'd lost everything. Not because of bad luck or circumstances beyond his control, but because of his own choices, his own cruelty, his own arrogance. Meanwhile, my life had transformed in ways I never imagined. The foundation work was fulfilling, purposeful, but I'd also returned to finance, consulting for companies that wanted to build ethical workplace cultures. Goldman Sachs had reached out, offering a senior position with full medical benefits and flexible scheduling. I'd accepted. James had won his 3rd Pulitzer Prize for the StrotCorp investigation. His book, The Cost of Cruelty: How Corporate America Betrays Its Most Vulnerable Workers, was a bestseller. We donated all proceeds to the foundation. On the 1-year anniversary of my termination, I did something Richard Carlson never expected. I bought StrotCorp Solutions. Not the whole company, I didn't want it. But when they sold off divisions during restructuring, I purchased the client services department, the division I'd built. The accounts I'd brought in, the strategies I'd designed. I renamed it Morrison Consulting Group. Every employee from the old client services team came with me. I gave them raises, better benefits, equity stakes. Within 6 months, we'd poached half of StrotCorp's remaining clients. Within a year, we were more profitable than Stratcor had ever been. And I'd done it ethically, treating employees like human beings, prioritizing people over profit margins. The business model Richard had built his empire on: work people until they break, discard them when they're no longer useful. I'd proven it wasn't just cruel. It was bad business. Today, standing in my office overlooking the city, I thought about that day in the Stratcor hallway, watching my face on a screen while people laughed at my pain. I thought about crawling into bed that night, believing my life was over. I thought about James saying, "We have work to do," and meaning it. My phone buzzed. A message from a woman in Ohio. "I just got fired for having diabetes. I found your foundation's website. Can you help me?" I forwarded it to Sarah with a note. "Priority case. Let's help her." This was the work now. One person at a time, one case at a time. Dismantling the systems that allowed people like Richard Carlson to thrive. People often ask me, "Do you regret what happened? Do you wish you'd never worked at Stratcor?" The answer was complicated. I regretted the pain. I regretted the humiliation. I regretted that I'd needed to get cancer and lose everything before I found my purpose. But I didn't regret fighting back, because Richard Carlson had taught me something valuable. Even if he hadn't meant to, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's transformation. He tried to destroy me, and instead, I became stronger. He tried to silence me, and instead I found my voice. He tried to prove I was worthless, and instead, I proved my worth to myself. Richard was in prison, bitter and broken, probably still believing he was the victim of circumstances rather than consequences. I was free, healthy, purposeful, surrounded by people I'd helped, leading an organization that mattered, building a business that proved ethics and profit weren't mutually exclusive. The real victory wasn't that Richard lost everything. The real victory was that I gained everything he could never have: peace, purpose, and the knowledge that I'd used my pain to protect others from experiencing the same. That congressional hearing I testified at? The Employee Protection Act passed 6 months later. President signed it into law with me standing behind her at the ceremony. Millions of workers now had protections Richard's victims never did. My foundation had expanded to 12 states. We'd helped over 800 people. We'd changed corporate policies at 34 companies. We'd made workplace discrimination expensive enough that companies thought twice before doing it. And every single time we won a case, every time an employee got justice, every time a corporation had to answer for cruelty, I thought about that message Richard sent Brandon. Sick people don't have fight left in them. He'd been so certain. So absolutely convinced that vulnerability meant weakness, that illness meant defeat, that he could crush me without consequences. He learned the hard way that the most dangerous opponents aren't the ones who've never been hurt. They're the ones who've been hurt, survived, and decided no one else should suffer the same way. James found me that evening, staring out the office window at the city lights. "Thinking about him?" he asked. "Thinking about everyone we've helped because of him," I corrected. Richard Carlson tried to end my story. Instead, he gave me the plot for something better. Any regrets? I thought about the question seriously. About the pain, the fear, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep wondering if I'd survive. About the moment I decided to fight back instead of accept defeat. "Not one," I said finally. He thought he was writing my ending. He was actually writing his own. If you've ever felt powerless, overlooked, or discarded by people who should have valued you, remember this: your story isn't over until you decide it is. And sometimes the people who try to break you end up giving you exactly what you need to become unbreakable. Lily Morrison had cancer, lost her job, and got humiliated in front of 47 people. But Lily Morrison also fought back, won justice, changed laws, helped hundreds of people, and built a life more meaningful than anything Richard Carlson's money could buy. Richard tried to destroy her. Instead, he destroyed himself while she became exactly who she was always meant to be. Someone who turned pain into purpose and survival into victory. The best revenge isn't making your enemy suffer. It's becoming so successful, so fulfilled, so completely at peace with who you are, that they become irrelevant to your story entirely. Richard Carlson is in prison, his name a punchline, his legacy a warning. Lily Morrison is free, healthy, and changing the world. That's not just justice. That's poetry.